Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you today at the AmChams of Asia Pacific Business Summit 2021. And let me extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of all of us from Singapore. I understand the last time we hosted this event was 2015, so it has been some time. And it is an extraordinary time to actually be hosting this particular event. I think you'll all agree that 2020 has been a year like no other. I think it's going to go down in history as an inflection point in many, many ways. But as we speak here today, I'm here to effectively deliver two big messages. One, things are getting better. And two, things will change. The first part of my message, things are getting better, I'm going to reserve for the Q&A, which I think we have coming shortly after. In my prepared comments, let me reflect a little bit on this idea that things are going to change. 2020 will indeed mark a major milestone, inflection point in the nature of business, the nature of many other things, but certainly in the nature of business and economics. It will mark a turning point, certainly, in the way we live. Much like after 9/11, the nature of travel changed, security protocols at airports, etc. I think it's quite clear that vaccine passports and the ability to live and work with masks and the misting of glasses is a fact of life. It's going to be on us. But I also believe that there are going to be at least three profound changes which are important to all of us in the conduct of our own businesses as we look into the future. The first of these changes to me is on the back of the idea of hyper-digitalization. It's been quite clear for most of this century that the nature of consumption is changing. I guess the Amazons of the world started it with e-commerce, and it started rapidly moving from books to retail to all kinds of other goods. But in truth, what has happened over the last year has completely changed the game in terms of all kinds of consumption and therefore all kinds of distribution as well. Esports, as many of you know, over the last decade has already overtaken physical sports. I was actually stunned to see 2.4 billion people do esports around the world. It's a bigger industry than physical sports. But when you start extending that into the domain of other industries, that gets different and quite interesting. So you think about education. Well, we always had Coursera, not always. For the last 10, 15 years, we had Coursera and we had Khan Academy. But e-education became a day-to-day event over the course of the last year. Whether you were in tertiary education or schools or colleges, the idea that you could sit at home and be educated for long periods of time was novel, but it happened. You think about health services. Teleconsult has been an idea at the periphery for a few years. But in 2020, the notion of e-medicine, telemedicine, e-consulting became embraced at scale by people around the world. Another industry which you'd find hard to think of, food and beverage, F&B. You know, you go to eat in a restaurant, you think about fine dining, it's a physical experience. But in 2020, rapidly, restaurants switched to being able to do delivery and deliver the same fine dining experience in your own homes. At DBS, we were able to spend time in the middle, in the summer. Over a month, we were able to digitize over 100 F&B outlets so they could effectively create virtual restaurants. And each of them did really well. So, and frankly, in our own industry, we've been moving on to electronic and digital banking now for some time. But in 3 months last year, in the second quarter when we had our lockdown, we saw more take-up of digital and electronic banking than we had in 3 years prior to that. And the interesting thing was the demographics. Typically, the early converts, the digital natives, they take to digital banking smoothly and swiftly. But in the second quarter of last year, our fastest growing demographic, which took to digital payments and digital banking, were actually people over 60 years of age. That demographic grew 4x. Similarly, in one weekend, we were able to bring 40,000 migrant labor in Singapore onto digital platforms. So when they went into quarantine in their dorms, they had access to payments and access to banking services. Now, these are both demographic profiles that in the past we found hard to convert. So I guess the basic underlying premise is this. The nature of consumption is changed dramatically, and I don't think it's going back. People's comfort with consuming electronically is on us. Now, this obviously has important implication for distribution models for everybody. But I think the bigger implication is for business models themselves. And the reason for that is once you start delivering electronically, then industry borders, industry barriers start breaking down. People talk about ecosystems and partnerships. We're certainly finding that to be true. People are rapidly moving across industry silos and industry barriers as they originally envisaged, and so are we. In our business, we find that by working in partnership with a whole range of different players and providers, we can now get into the range of providing some advertising services, providing some software services, providing some logistic management services. And equally, there are other players in the system who are now providing a whole range of financial services which you would not have envisaged before. So to me, this idea that business models will change, that you'll have to reimagine what you are, that is going to accelerate a lot more than we saw even in the first 10, 15 years of this century. This is important because I've said before, I think it's going to be important on steroids. We are all technology companies now. So if you think you're a pharmaceutical company, think again. If you think you're a hotel, think again. If you think you're in logistics, think again. Every one of us has got to believe we are a technology company offering a range of services where customer experience is going to be at the core. And 2020, the COVID period, has really put this change, accelerated this change and put it on steroids. The second big thing, which I think is going to change for all of us, for businesses, is the other side of the spectrum, effectively the supply chain. And I'll touch briefly on two parts of that supply chain. The first is the manpower part of the supply chain, the human resource aspect. You know, in an ironic kind of way, people are talking about the end of globalization, but in an ironic kind of way, in a contrarian way, I actually think that the COVID situation is going to accelerate the globalization of the labor force. Seems to me that over the course of last year, all of us learned one very important lesson, and that is how to let people work from anywhere, how to let people work from home without a doubt. Even today, in country after country, 50, 60, 70, 80% of the workforce is working from home. But we also found that when you can work from home, your home could be in any part of the country, any part of the planet, frankly. At DBS, a large part of our technology happens in India. And we found that letting all of our engineers work from home overnight, whether they were in Bangalore or Hyderabad or Gurgaon, was effortless. And we found that true in all of our countries, in Hong Kong, Taiwan, people were able to go in any part of the nation, any part of the system, and work seamlessly and effortlessly. Now, this idea is born of two things. One, obviously, there's been a great improvement in technology over the last few years. So bandwidth has increased, the ability to access safely, cybersecurity protocols have increased, and therefore the change in technology makes this a lot better. And frankly, as you get to 5G in the next year or so as it gets rolled out, I think you'll find even more of that. Technology is not going to be a barrier. But I think the second thing that's changed is people's risk appetite. The willingness of companies to envisage work being done remotely for things that were hitherto unthinkable, that has changed. And again, to give our own example, there were some parts of the banking business where we felt it was really important to have people come and do it in a secure environment. We gave them physical security, we had premises control, we gave them oversight. In the course of this year, we didn't have a choice. We had to open up and let people do a lot more things from home than we would otherwise have done. And that's true for all of you. Everybody has got used to the fact that anybody can work from home. So to my mind, one of the big changes this is going to lead to is the recognition that you can really embrace a global workforce. You don't have to be limited to people who are within this particular country, their immigration laws, their cost implications. You could have a small lab in Israel. You could have people working in Silicon Valley. You could have people working in different parts of your business empire and bring them together relatively seamlessly. What technology has also done is allowed people to work horizontally and collaboratively in a much better way, much easier way. And therefore, you can have parts of work done by different people and it all comes together quite seamlessly. So I think this shift, this change in the workforce, the greater globalization of the workforce is a trend that is on us and it is going to guide businesses in the way we build and work as we go forward. The other part of the supply chain is not the human resource element, but the traditional notion of supply chain, goods and services, goods in particular. Quite clearly, people have talked about moving from just in time to just in case. So you have to build greater resiliency and so on. A lot is made about the likelihood that people will onshore a large part of the supply chain. Again, I'm a little contrarian. I don't think you will see a lot of onshoring. I think by and large, people will like to keep the supply chain close to where the markets are, and that doesn't necessarily mean close to where headquarters is. But I do think that people will focus very hard on taking friction out of the supply chain, because lack of transparency and friction is what caused supply chain challenges in the course of 2020. People found that it was lack of knowledge of not just who your supplier is, but who the supplier's supplier is in the third level and the fourth level that wound up creating issues in being able to get goods to market. I think this realization that you need to have better transparency and the realization that you need to take friction out of the information flow, the data flow, and actually the flow of goods, that is going to make some pretty important impact on the way supply chains are being constructed. Now again, in Singapore, I'm part of something called the Emerging Stronger Task Force. And we focused very hard on trying to think about where we take Singapore into the future. This idea of trying to take Singapore to be able to distribute goods regionally, what I said earlier, the e-distribution, that's been important. But in the construct of the supply chain, we've been equally focused on how do you create the appropriate platforms, the electronic and digital platforms that allow this transparency and the frictionless movement of goods and services to happen. So I do think that's the second change you'll see, a lot more digitization, a lot more working together and getting information and data to bear on creating greater efficiency. At DBS, we were somewhat fortunate. We have been, over the years, created a whole range of APIs, application program interfaces. We have about 600 of them which we use, which allow us to plug into supply chains and help digitize supply chains quite easily and quickly. That part of our business in the last 6 months has just gone gangbusters. And that just tells me that companies are changing and industries are changing. People are reaching out to us to plug our APIs into their logistics process, into their payment process, into their distribution process. So it's quite clear to me that this is a trend that is on us and is likely to continue. The third area where I think you're going to see important and profound change is a refocus, a rededication, and an acceleration of the agenda of ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. I think the S of the ESG is quite obvious to all of us. It's not got a lot of attention till the last 12 months. And certainly the YouTube pictures of long queues at food banks, all of the protests, the riots, the frontline workers who had to go into work and were the most disadvantaged. That's something that everybody has seen in the news clips in the papers every day over the last year. I think there's recognition that as we as businesses are going to have to really step up and play a greater and more relevant social role. That realization is quite clearly on us. As apart from all of the statements and pronouncements made by leadership, business roundtable, etc., you can see this in the actions of individual businesses, and I see that around us with all of our customers. The recognition that you have to do a lot more for the bottom of the pyramid, that you must be seen to be socially relevant, that you must be seen to be not just egregious and gouging, but giving back to community and society. I think that change is real. Embedding that in the fabric of business and the fabric of the way you conduct your business, I think that's going to be completely essential. But I also believe that the E part of ESG the focus on the green planet, on environment, that is also going to get a tremendous fillip from what we've seen over the last year. Again, there were a lot of question marks. So there's one part which said that given all we need to do to claw back from the crisis, given the necessity of getting economies up and running, necessity of being able to put food on the table, people will take the foot off the accelerator on the environmental agenda and focus a lot more on getting things going. The alternative view, of course, which is one I espouse, is that the COVID has caused two things to happen. Number one, a true recognition that tail risks do occur. I mean, who would have believed that COVID would shut down the world? It was a tail event, but it happened. Climate change and biodiversity loss is not even that much of a tail event. It is going to happen, it's only a question of time. But the recognition that being prepared for events of this sort is incumbent on us as businesses, incumbent on governments and society, but certainly incumbent on us as businesses, that has become very, very clear. The other dimension to this is, if you had asked anybody a year ago, 18 months ago, could the world find $25 trillion to throw at a problem from nowhere? 12, $13 trillion of monetary stimulus, 12, $13 trillion of fiscal stimulus, and I'm not even counting all the numbers, there's probably a lot more by now. It would have been unbelievable. In the US, all of QE, QE1, QE2, QE3 expanded the Fed's balance sheet to $4.5 trillion, and people were saying, oh my God, I mean, that's unbelievable. Well, in less than 6 months, that balance sheet went from $4 trillion to $12 trillion. Now, if we take one lesson away, it is this, that when you have a gun to your head, when push comes to shove, we will find the resources and we will find the capacities to do the right thing. So I believe there is a recognition that with climate change and the environmental agenda, we have reached a stage that we have to put our shoulder to the wheel. We have to find the resources, we have to find the capacities to be able to make an impact and get ready now. You can see that in a lot of the fiscal programs that regions and countries are announcing as they build back, the Build Back Better agenda. So the European Green Recovery Fund, President Biden's programs on green infrastructure. Again, in Singapore, we are focused very hard on trying to see how we can create a more sustainable and more green development agenda for the country. So I think you will see a lot more of this across the board. Now, this is something which you could see as a threat, but you could see as an opportunity as well. It is a threat because obviously we need to think about the risks, we need to think about stranded assets, we need to think about impairments, we need to think about how do you pivot. But the opportunity really is quite simply this. This will be a $1 trillion industry. I think the redoing of all the infrastructure will require a lot of spend. I think the redoing of moving from combustion fuel vehicles to electric vehicles will require a lot of spend. I think all of these changes will require fundamental rethinking of business models for everybody, but the opportunity is very real. So let me conclude on this, that I think the short term is better. The long term will see a lot of change. The change will require adaptive leadership. It will require the capacity to pivot. But the change will also bring a large amount of opportunity for each and every one of us. What to me, the underlying truth is Asia will continue to do well in this environment. The fundamentals of Asia have not changed. We are still the fastest growing part of the planet. We still have the best demographics. We still have digitally native populations. We still have growing consumption demand. We still have increasing access to wealth and creation of wealth in our region. None of these things are changing. And therefore, if we play our cards right, and if we adapt swiftly and intelligently to the new changes on us, I think all of us can do exceedingly well. Again, thank you for taking the time to attend this summit, and I will be happy to address more of these thoughts and others through the Q&A.